The Curse of the Red-Eyed Stranger, Part 3. The first victim stumbled out of the woods, my thoughts spinning in a chaotic mess. The jagged letters carved into the tree flashed behind my eyes every time I blinked. Mia. Her name was a warning, a reminder, and a threat all at once. I spent the rest of the day locked in my room, trying to figure out what to do next. My hand throbbed where the mark burned into my skin like a living brand. Every now and then, the eye in the center of the symbol seemed to twitch, as if it was watching me. By the time night fell, I was barely holding it together. The guilt over Mia's disappearance gnawed at me like a rabid animal, and the silence of the house felt suffocating. I needed answers, but the only place I could think to go was the one place I swore I'd never return to, the woods. Before I could talk myself out of it, I grabbed a flashlight and headed for the door. The forest felt different this time. The trees seemed closer together, their branches weaving into a canopy so thick that even the moonlight couldn't break through. My flashlight barely cut through the darkness, the beam trembling as much as my hands. I followed the path back to the clearing, each step heavier than the last. The hum returned as I drew closer, faint at first but growing louder with every breath. It felt like it was coming from inside me, vibrating in my chest, crawling under my skin. When I reached the clearing, I froze. The well was back, but it wasn't the same. The stones were slick with some dark, oozing liquid that smelled of rot and decay. The air around it shimmered like heat waves, and the hum was deafening now, a constant, pulsing rhythm that made my teeth ache. "Why are you here?" The voice came from behind me. I spun around, my flashlight slicing through the darkness, but there was no one there. "Why did you bring her?" It wasn't a single voice, it was many. A chorus of whispers, layered and distorted, rising and falling like a twisted melody. "I didn't bring her," I said, my voice shaking. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen." The whispers paused, as if considering my words. Then they returned, sharper and colder than before. "She called," they said. "You summoned him. You opened the door. I just wanted to see if the legend was real," I pleaded. "I didn't know." The whispers erupted into laughter, a harsh, grating sound that echoed through the clearing. "Lies," they hissed. "You knew. You always knew." Before I could respond, the ground beneath my feet began to tremble. The well shifted, its stones grinding against each other, and something began to rise from its depths. It was a figure, the red-eyed stranger, but he was no longer shrouded in shadows. His form was sharp and skeletal, his bones blackened and jagged like charred wood. The red eyes burned brighter than ever, and his void-like mouth stretched into a grotesque grin. "You've been marked," he said, his voice a low, guttural growl. "You belong to me now." I stumbled back, nearly dropping the flashlight. "What do you want from me?" I shouted. The stranger tilted his head, his crimson eyes boring into me. "You will see," he said, echoing the words he'd spoken the night before. "And so will she." My heart sank. "Mia, is she alive?" The stranger's grin widened, and for a moment, I thought I saw something flicker in his eyes, something familiar. "Follow the mark," he said, his voice a twisted purr. "It will guide you to her." Before I could say anything else, the figure dissolved into smoke, the hum fading with him. The well collapsed into itself, leaving only a dark, gaping hole where it had stood. The silence that followed was almost worse than the noise. I looked down at my hand. The mark was glowing faintly now, the eye twitching and pulsing in time with my heartbeat. I had no choice. If there was even a chance that Mia was still alive, I had to follow the mark no matter where it led. The mark guided me out of the woods, its pulsing glow growing stronger with every step. It led me through the empty streets of our town, past darkened houses and flickering streetlights, until I reached the edge of an old industrial district. The air here was heavy with the stench of rust and oil, the buildings looming like forgotten giants. The mark on my hand burned as I approached an abandoned factory, its windows shattered and its walls covered in graffiti. The hum returned, faint but insistent, drawing me closer. I pushed open the rusted door and stepped inside. The factory was a labyrinth of shadows and decay, the floor littered with broken glass and twisted metal. The hum grew louder as I navigated the maze of corridors, the mark on my hand glowing brighter with each step. And then I found her. Mia was sitting in the center of a vast, empty room, her back to me. Her clothes were torn, and her hair hung in matted tangles around her face. "Mia," I called out, my voice echoing in the cavernous space. She didn't move. I took a step closer, my flashlight trembling in my hand. "Mia?" "It's me. Are you okay?" Still no response. As I got closer, I realized something was wrong. Her skin was too pale, her movements too rigid. And then she turned to face me. Her eyes were gone. In their place were the glowing red orbs, identical to the stranger's. Her mouth stretched into an unnatural smile, and when she spoke, her voice was not her own. "You called," she said,